Hello, Tom.
Hey, Dave.
How you doing?
Okay, and you?
Good, thank you.
Happy Groundhog Day.
Indeed. So did you have a chance to go through the draft?
Not very much, no. I mean, we could. I'll be happy to talk with you about this as you go through. But
Okay. Yeah, it's not so much against the substance. This has been borrowed from previous 40B decisions. So in terms of like the substance, the nuts and bolts of it, I think we're generally okay with it. It was more about, I think, a couple of questions on some of the waivers and then, a few of the conditions, much like we did with 200Q. Just make sure we got the wording right. There's monies being proposed, donations to the town, that kind of thing, if the town is to accept them. So again, we got the wording right and so forth. But we'll wait for the others here. I know we're being recorded. Hi, Jesse.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Appreciate your time making this meeting, Tom. It's been a while since we've seen each other.
That's right.
Virtually or in person.
Right. We decided to wait until Groundhog Day.
I heard some more winter, or maybe a first winter, based on how it's gone so far.
I just wouldn't want to be in Texas right now.
Same.
Why? What's happening in Texas?
Oh, ice storms. They've just gotten the brunt of like some bitter cold weather, ice, and accidents. People have lost their lives. It's horrible.
Their electric grid worked well last time that happened. So yeah.
Hi, Greg.
How's it going?
Good.
Hey, Greg.
All right, we have a quorum. So why don't we get started? So welcome to the subcommittee meeting. Again, with Greg and I both in attendance. We posted notice for this and we're being recorded and notes will be captured. But Tom, as I stated up front when you joined, much like we've done with a couple other big projects, when we get to the end and feel like we're close to getting a decision perhaps voted on, there's a lot that goes into the decision, potentially conditions and waivers in the case of a 40B project. And as we've done with a couple others, we just wanted to review a few things with you. Make sure we've dotted and crossed things appropriately in your mind, and we're all comfortable with them before we proceed. The intent here is to hopefully clarify anything we need to based on the latest draft and bring it to the full board next Wednesday, the 8th, and take everyone through, at least at a high level, where things stand. And then if we're so inclined, potentially there's a vote and we go from there and get things filed. So that's just to give you an idea of timeline. We're really at the end here, we believe. So Jesse, do you want to share and go through some things, or do you want me to share? How do you want to drive? It really doesn't matter to me. You're the applicant. We're the board.
I'm happy to do it, Dave. Oh. Whatever your preference is.
That'd be fine. You can. Okay. You have the document handy and.
Yeah. So just to make sure I pull up the right thing. So the document that you emailed over to Tom, the documents, those are the same as the ones that I sent to you, I think the same day.
Should be. It should say, 130 clean.
Yep. Clean revised.
January 30th. Yep.
Okay.
Should be. And then I sent them the waivers, and I think I sent them both. Yeah.
Okay. I'll go ahead and put that up now. I've got the decision first. We can go to between whichever document you prefer.
So as I said, I think the structure of the decision, I think we're generally comfortable with, right? We've leveraged previous decisions, so most of the stuff I don't think we need to go through unless anyone had a question or concern. At this point, I was figuring we'd be jumping right down to either waivers or conditions to just go through some of those. Greg, did you have anything that you, in your mind, wanted to run by Tom in this at this time?
I'm just scrolling through. No, I think that's right, Dave. And then I think one thing we wanted to run by Tom too was the affordability language or affordability requirements. Do you remember what section that is, Jesse? I just don't.
It's under the findings or conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
I'll go to
that's right. We just didn't have, there was some question about case law or something, and I just don't have the background.
Yeah, just to let you know, Tom, so as I think you probably know, the board has an MHP consultant named Ezra Glenn, who's advising the board during the hearings. And the question that he raised after reviewing it, I think here we are, the affordability. The question that Ezra had raised is whether there was a concern about some of the language in this section of the conditions pertaining to affordability. Because there's some case law from the Housing Appeals Committee that says that the zoning board's decision shouldn't be treading into the area that's really for the subsidizing agency to regulate. This language here that we have that's in the draft is substantially identical to what's been used in the past by the board for 40B projects. I didn't have any concern with it, and the subsidizing agency, the Mass Housing here, typically they've not raised major issues in my experience unless the applicant has raised an issue, and typically those come into play really only in situations that aren't applicable here, where the board is trying to impose regulatory requirements on the project that aren't provided for by statute or regulation, which, as I said, is not happening here. At least in my view, it's not. So I didn't have any concern with these, and we also included, consistent with the previous two 40Bs that I'm aware of, the Tarrant Lane project and was it Crescent Commons?
Crescent, yes.
Crescent Commons, which provided for this specific provision here, which was intended as a severability clause, basically, so that if the state DHCD takes a look at this set of conditions, or the subsidizing agency has an issue with any of them, they can be disapproved without affecting the remainder of the decision.
Yeah, my only exposure to the situation that I guess Ezra was concerned about had to do with some condition that somebody had imposed about the financing, where you get your money. And I think the Housing Appeals Committee said, that's none of your business, ZBA. And just looking quickly through here, I don't see anything that would fall victim to that criticism. And I like the idea of what you describe as, in effect, a severability clause at the end. Sure. So I think I see Ezra's point, but I'm not bothered by it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
And Tom, severability clauses it's a securities regulation world. Sometimes even though everyone puts them in, they are not enforceable. Severability clause is fine in this instance.
So all provisions herein pertaining to affordability in the affordable unit shall be subject to the approval of DHCD and the subsidizing agency. In the event that any such provision is disapproved by DHCD or the subsidizing agency, such provision shall be deemed null and void without affecting the validity of the remainder of this comprehensive permit. Now, we can say that, and it's always possible that if something is stricken, it's going to be deemed to go so much to the heart of the comprehensive permit that it would have greater impact. But that seems awfully unlikely. I've never heard of a case like that. And I think this is as much as we can do to insulate ourselves from ill consequences.
Sounds good.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, I think that was one.
Mhm.
Other conditions, I'm just scrolling down on my copy, just see.
The other one that's popping up in my mind, Dave, was the condition regarding the, I guess, the process for approval by the town of the work that's being done in the North Avenue right of way.
Right, so we're jumping down to
Is that the new one you added, Jesse?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
so go, well, stop at trees, stop at landscaping there. I don't know, there's a couple of these, right? So
Okay,
right there, landscaping, tree allowance. So the applicant will install new trees on the right of way, subject to approval by the DPW and sufficient authorization from the town. In any event, the conditions will not support it, will install the same, shall install the same at alternative locations. So again, I think we've used this before, I think on other decisions. But again, it says they need to do it, but if a later determination is there isn't the sufficient space for it, they still have to provide the trees as shown on the plans, but maybe the DPW would want them further down the street or in some, relatively close location. So again, just wording wise, seems okay to you, Tom?
Oh, yeah, and I think it's inevitable, given that we're basically talking about property of a third party here that's not signing on to the agreement, that party being the town of Wakefield acting through its DPW.
Mhm.
You, the board, cannot commit the DPW to any particular decision. So
Right.
we don't know whether they'd say, hey, you can't have all those trees here. They're going to get in each other's way and cause more harm than good.
So the language of subject to their review, leaves it up to their discretion. We're not saying they have to do it, but we're giving the DPW final discretion there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next one, I think, ties in with something later, the trees and the wetland buffer. So, so Jesse, I don't know if you want to summarize kind of where things stand with conservation, because obviously received some feedback from that commission.
Yeah.
But you have applied officially to them till the end, which is somewhat unique to 40Bs, right? That you do zoning first, then conservation, but clearly there's a conservation aspect to this. So some of that information has found its way into the decision here, but we want to make sure we're in good standing because you haven't actually applied to them yet, right?
So, and can we even say we received feedback from the commission? We really received it from the agent who at the time was not speaking on behalf of the commission, right? Because you haven't applied to the commission.
But they get a copy of the application. They were aware there was a public hearing. They sent correspondence.
But I don't,
Right. You're right, Greg. Thanks for the clarification.
Just, for the, whatever that procedural issue is for Jesse.
Yeah, I agree with that characterization of Rebecca's role. I mean, she's the agent, but she doesn't bind the commission, obviously. She's there as their liaison, but we still have to obviously apply to the commission and get the approval of the commissioners, whether or not Rebecca or Elaine agree or don't agree with what they do. So Rebecca's participation, I see as an advisory role, as a consulting role, just to give us, and the subcommittee members who attended those meetings with her, just a sense of what the likely issues are once we do get to the Conservation Commission. And as Dave mentioned, Tom, we are that's our next stop. Basically, once this hearing is concluded, we'll have to file with the Conservation Commission under the State Wetlands Act because of the wetlands on site. Obviously, no waivers are available from state law, so that's a requirement for us.
Be here. With all that said, they've agreed to plant some trees along the around the border of the property, which happen to be within 25 feet of the no disturb zone, which are subject to review and approval by the commission. Again, we're not legislating, but we're leaving it to their discretion. That can happen ultimately, right? But they are on the plans they were contemplated, right?
Yes, Tom, would it be helpful for me to put up the plan so you can see what we're referring to, or is the concept clear enough?
I think I get this. I think I understand this, but if we deal with other issues, I may need to see a plan. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, the 10-cent tour, basically within the 25-foot buffer that the local commission likes to apply as a policy. We had proposed some plantings of new trees in that area that the landscape architect thought were wetlands appropriate. During the initial subcommittee meetings, I think the sense we got was that was favorably received by Rebecca, but subsequently she's issued comment letters that were maybe less favorable to that idea. I don't think my client is committed one way or the other. We thought that this was something that the commission would appreciate and want, but if it's something that they don't want, we certainly have no problem with taking those out.
Okay. I just want to ask the ZBA members, this appears to say, okay, there are going to be 25 trees on site, but it's subject to commission approval. What if the commission doesn't want those trees or certain of them within that 25-foot area? Do you want to require that those trees be placed elsewhere? Do you care? Do you have it in mind that there's a certain number of trees that the developer is asked to plant?
Oh, like the ones out front, if they can't fit in the sidewalk, at the discretion of the DPW. So
Yeah.
we expect them to be somewhere else if the Concom said, yeah, and it says series, it's not 25 trees, but they're within 25 feet of that buffer zone. So I forget how many actual trees are being proposed, but Greg, I don't think we had contemplated, correct me if I'm wrong, if the Concom said no or fewer trees, that we had still want a number of trees, but they'd put them somewhere else on the site. Because there was a landscaping plan and there's stuff put all over the place, including these. So I wasn't thinking that, Tom. I don't think we were contemplating that we'd get them one way or the other.
Okay, I would just note that the way this is written now, which I don't object to, if the commission says, no, you can't put them there, there's no guarantee that they're going to be anywhere.
I think we're okay with that.
Okay.
But Greg, we can take that one back if we do want to. Jesse, I don't know if we want to. I'd have to go look at the plan again myself and see, would there be an opportunity to put them somewhere else if the Concom said no, in which case we could add a line like the DPW one that they maybe are placed elsewhere.
I mean, on the other hand, you could basically reuse the language from A, and then if they did think they're not gonna fit anywhere or whatever, come back to us for a what do you call it in 40B? Insubstantial change, not a minor mod. Change.
Right. Okay, we'll make a note of that one. Yeah,
Oh,
not that we sort of work out that. All right, so that's 24B.
Just before we move on, I've got the landscape plan. It's about 15 trees, it looks like, along that line. And the rest of the site is pretty full of trees. So I'm not sure where we would put 15 trees of that size if we needed to move them. But I suppose we can address that with the full board if that's something they want to get into.
Yep. And we can have a quick look.
Maybe you wouldn't want them elsewhere. I don't know. I just want to make sure you're aware of what I see as the consequences of this language, which again, I'm okay with.
Yep. All right, noted. That's one item we can take to the full board.
And so Jesse, when we take it, just obviously have that other option in mind. If they / Chip thinks he wants them somewhere else, we can, do the reuse the language from A, but come back for a minor mod if need be.
Okay. I just put up this is the landscape plan here. So the ones that we're talking about are on this line here. So as you can see, obviously the parking lot takes up most of the site, and then the remaining areas are pretty full of trees here and over here. Maybe there's a little room, but I think at a certain point it becomes a little bit full.
Yep. No, and maybe they'd say, look, not 15, but some smaller number, in which case I think again, I'd be okay, but it might be just an item to confirm with the rest of the board. And if we would want language in the decision that helps us there down the road potentially.
Okay,
Okay.
I've made a note of that, so we can talk about it.
Perfect. All right. The next one jumping down, I think, is 28L. I don't know if there was another one before that, because it gets into the new crosswalk, and
Mhm.
then there's a monetary thing here. Yeah, so this one, Tom. So Jesse, you want to just summarize again?
Sure. So this condition, Tom, has to do with an agreement that we made to install a crosswalk across North Avenue I think the location is yet to be finalized 100%. It's to be, I think Bill Renault wants to coordinate it somewhat with the potential to move the MBTA bus stop that's in that area. He'd like to have it closer to where these residential buildings are rather than where it is currently, down closer, I think, to the Subaru dealership.
Mhm.
So we're agreeable to that, to putting in the crosswalk and the rapid flashing beacons, which are those the poles that the pedestrian can press the button and it turns the flashing lights on to let motorists know that someone's going to be crossing. And then we included, in lieu of this, the applicant will make a contribution of $25,000 to the town of Wakefield, which would enable the engineering department to do that work themselves, potentially, or for other uses for the shared use path.
Hmm.
And the 25,000, that figure that came from Bill Renault.
Okay, so I have no problem with this in concept. Let me just ask about the mechanics of the 25,000. If you decide to spend the money and give the town a check, don't we have to deposit that in the general fund and then appropriate at town meeting?
I believe you would. Yeah, I think that's right.
But weren't these words also leveraged from previous decisions? So these were words that, like, it doesn't get into mentioning those details, Tom, here.
Yeah, and I don't think that you
But there's
could,
just mechanics of it.
couldn't
but-
dictate a different result because it's a function of state law.
Right.
In the past, I've tried other gimmicks like treating it as a gift, and the Department of Revenue doesn't like that. They say there's really no donated intent here. You're trying to comply with the permit. But just so long as you understand that there is that issue, that if we take the money, it goes into the general fund and town meeting actually has to appropriate it before you can spend it for this purpose.
Okay.
Right.
Tom, do you happen to know, is that the procedure that was used for the mitigation funds for Tarrant Lane? I don't know, because we weren't directly involved in that at that time.
I may have to claim the fifth. You know, I'm not saying that Wakefield always does it right.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you do.
They may not have been paid yet either, right? I thought they were certificate of occupancy based. I don't remember. Maybe it's building permit based. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I should, but I don't.
And I'm just, yeah, I don't either. Okay. All right, I think there's another one, a couple down. N, maybe, N or O. No, not the retaining wall. O, maybe. Again, we get into a
yes.
monetary thing.
Yeah, this is the $40,000 mitigation contribution that Bill Renault and Traffic Advisory Committee thought was appropriate, and we're agreeable to it.
Okay. Yeah, so my understanding with respect to that kind of contribution is that the town generally cannot require it, it would be deemed an exaction, but a developer can agree to it. And so I've got no objection to it. It poses, of course, the same issue under municipal finance law as the previous one does. So it would go into the general fund subject to appropriation.
Right. And again, much like the 200 Quantipower one we did, I think that was a different number, but it's same kind of thing that the engineering department put forth for future offsite traffic mitigation, right, to be determined. But I think it's the same language, contributions.
One way around that, and I'm not suggesting we apply it here, but just to something to think about, is the town is going to be asked at the next town meeting to create an affordable housing trust fund. And if you do that and you then you can have a bylaw that permits developers to make payments in lieu of certain improvements. And you can provide that the payments would go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and there you circumvent the whole appropriation process that way.
But that's a give and take with the developer. That's a in lieu of, I don't know, some whatever other leverage you may have in lieu of the 18% or something.
Yeah, frequently I've seen it like in Rowley, where there's a bylaw that allows you, if you create a certain amount of open space, to cluster your units closer together. But it also says that if you want to avoid some of that open space donation creation, you can instead donate money to the town. And the amount is tied to the amount of open space that's being excused.
Interesting.
Okay. So I did find quickly, just as an aside, or the Tarrant Lane did say shall contribute 140,000 towards the installation of a new water main and replacement of sewer main. And that work was done. I just don't remember if it went to town meeting, got appropriated, like as you said, Tom, but I seem to recall it must have. I seem to recall there was something about Hopkins and the work that was done up there. But that was based on a contribution that was offered by the applicant at that time for Tarrant Lane. So anyway, all right, gentlemen, what was the next item I think we wanted to?
Well, I guess N it has to do with the permission for the town to do the work within the right of way. And this one, Tom, in case you're not aware of what this has to do with, the North Avenue right of way turns out to be significantly wider in its layout than the actual paved width of North Avenue. And so what was done here is we decided to utilize the open space that's between the property line and the paved right of way to do some landscaping and have some walkways and just beautification improvements for the North Avenue street scene and the property itself. So that's what this one has to do with. Obviously the town's right of way in North Avenue is not our property, so we would need town permission to do work in that. So we included some language that provides for approval of that, and I believe this is the first one, but there may be a second paragraph having to do with this as well later in the decision.
Okay, this speaks of a lease agreement between the town and who, the applicant?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
It could be, I suppose it could be a lease agreement or a license or occupancy. It doesn't necessarily need to specify a lease.
Yeah.
It probably better if it did one of those avenues anyway.
Yeah, I should think that we'd feel more comfortable with a license agreement. we frequently license people to use town property for one or another purpose. For one thing, a lease would be, well, what period of time would you be thinking of?
Well, I think I know where you're going. Are you going with the 99-year restriction?
I don't know. I'm just thinking that if it's easy enough with a license agreement to say that it's, it's of indefinite term, but terminable at will by the town.
Does it make sense for this agreement, for this decision to just say an agreement acceptable to the town, and we can work out what type of agreement works best for the town after?
Sure, I have no problem with that, Jeff.
Just so then we don't, this phone call doesn't have to box you and possibly town council, whoever has to approve it.
Okay, so I've just been doing some red line noting here, but I'll take that out and just leave the change here from lease to license. And then we can discuss that with the board, I suppose.
Well, but my saying is you don't even have to say license, you can just say an agreement, and then, you wouldn't have to, if it changes from a lease to a license or whatever form it takes, there's no reason to come back to us and say, hey, we said lease, we need an insubstantial change or anything.
Yeah, you can just say an agreement with the town in form acceptable to the town. One other big thing is if it's a license agreement, I at least take the position we don't need town meeting approval. But if it's a lease, and certainly if it were an easement, we'd have to go to town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
All right.
All right, so maybe I'll just keep going here. And if anybody sees something that you want to flag.
I think it was 40 that relates to that one, to the one
Okay.
we discussed.
Yeah, that's right. So this is the new one.
And 41 is related. So maybe both of these, just again, making sure we got the, this one refers back to the 3 we just reviewed. So yeah, maybe both of these.
So on 40, the language here, I drafted this. This is based on some language that we used for a project that was approved. I think it was last year down in Belmont. And there the board had required a similar thing to what we're doing here. It was a bit of an unusual project there because the town had an abandoned, or not officially abandoned. It was a former town road that had basically been discontinued in effect because the state laid out a highway next to it and it became unnecessary. And so like here, they wanted us to make some improvements in that right of way. And so we came up with this condition with the town council there in Belmont, and I've tweaked it here, obviously, because it's a different proposal. But that's basically the backstory of where this came from.
Okay, so the idea is that the developer would do work on North Ave with the approval of the DPW, and the work gets embodied in the town property. It becomes the property of the town. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's subject to the previous, I guess, the previous condition that we were just talking about regarding a potential license agreement, or maybe that's the now that we're not specifying the nature of it, maybe just the agreement is a maintenance agreement that says we have to upkeep it and replace it if it falls apart, things of that nature.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that license agreement. Just thinking about it further, does it obligate the applicants to keep those improvements in place indefinitely, subject to the willingness of the town?
I don't have a strong feeling about that. Whether we include it or not, I guess my position would be that installing the improvements would require the permission of the town, and the same would be true of removing those improvements. But if it would make everyone feel more comfortable to include language saying that they shall not be removed, shall be maintained in perpetuity, that's certainly fine with us. We don't have any intent to remove those.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that, of course, once it's installed with the permission of the town, the developer couldn't unilaterally take it out. You're right, because it's on town property. But the issue of maintenance, you might want to address.
So this 40, it says the agreement acceptable to the town and applicant has reached to authorize these improvements, including perpetual maintenance of same and matters of liability. Is that, do you think
There you
that's
go.
sufficient, Tom, or
Yes,
do you think?
that's good. That's right.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
What is "and matters of liability"? What does that actually get us, though?
I think this language is coming from a different project. So if you don't think it's appropriate here, we can talk about that. But what we had in mind in my conversations with Belmont's town council was, what happens if someone from the public is in the North Avenue right of way, and they take a walk up that walkway, the circular walkway that we're proposing. Who's liable for that? Is it the developer? Does the developer have to clear the snow, clear the ice, things like that? Just making sure that I think it's understood here that we are going to be required to maintain it, including things like clearing it of snow, so that the town doesn't end up with an issue where you're potentially being sued by someone who slips and falls on this improvement that we're really obligated to take that responsibility for, as if it were our own property.
Yeah.
That was my intent anyway.
Okay. And the ultimate agreement covers the decision. Okay, I reread the sentence. I get it. Okay.
Just, I'm not sure that in 40, it actually makes clear that that it's the developer that is responsible for perpetual maintenance and liability. I think it would be a small matter to make that clear, but as currently worded, it just says the parties, Wakefield and the applicant, will reach an agreement about these issues.
Okay.
Hmm.
In the red line, I've proposed including the developer's perpetual maintenance and matters of liability. Is that sufficient to your mind, Tom, or do you think that there's more that we need to specify?
The developer's obligation of perpetual maintenance and of same and matters of liability.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
How about obligation to indemnify the town? Yeah, that's good.
No issue with that.
We don't actually define developers, like we do, like
Oh,
here and after or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the applicant or,
yeah, that's right. That's
there we go. Thank you.
mistake.
I was just looking, maybe we did define it. I just looked real quick.
No, you're right. You've got an eagle eye for those details.
All right.
You must have been a first-year associate in another life.
No.
You're my
Maybe
next
another life.
You're my next hire, David. Mhm.
All right. And then
So,
41.
next one is mitigation, the mitigation condition. This one's a little bit long, so we're gonna have to do this, I guess, as we go through it. And the intent here was, I guess, to spell out, Tom, the point that you made previously about mitigation payments typically, I guess, being frowned on, at least from the HAC's perspective, and also in other contexts, but providing specifically that we're agreeing to it to avoid any issue with respect to that.
Yeah.
And with respect to actual payments, just clarifying the procedure and when those payments are due to be made. And there, I think our concern here is we just want to make sure that the project is going to be approved and not intending to bind any commission or department's hand with respect to approving the project. But if something were to happen that the project can't go forward, or the project gets disapproved by conservation or something like that, that we wouldn't have these outstanding mitigation obligations for a project that doesn't actually end up happening.
Mhm. One concern about the paragraph that begins, if any town commission. I'm sure this wasn't intentional, but I think as worded, it would mean that if, let's say, the Conservation Commission were to disapprove of some segregable portion of the plan, and I don't know whether you can segregate any part of it, and the project nonetheless went forward, you'd be free of all mitigation obligations. And I don't think that's your intent. I think the point is that if there's a disapproval or other event that results in the project not proceeding, then you are free from mitigation.
Yeah,
So,
that it's not our intent to have, as you suggested, to have some kind of loophole where we get out of these obligations if the Concom says get rid of those trees, for example.
So I'm thinking just after the end of the parenthetical, we might add something like, and as a result, the project does not go forward, or the project is not constructed.
Or completed, or something,
Yeah.
And as a result, the project does not.
Should we say is not constructed, or?
Does not receive the certificate, building certificate or building permit? Is it, what is constructed at all in a different manner?
Project.
Yeah, that's.
And as a result, the project maybe does not receive a building permit.
That's fine with me.
Yeah. Yeah, and that ties in with the next paragraph, which says that if you're to make a payment of funds, it's at the time that you pick up the building permit.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's in previous projects, I think the mitigation funds were tied to earlier project milestones. They might have been when the application is filed, but I think the reason why we prepared it here is along the lines that I discussed previously about making sure that the project can go forward. And then the second part of this paragraph, I think we're just trying to protect ourselves in case there's, I guess, cost overruns with respect to things that DPW wants to earmark these mitigation funds for, so that it's clear that the commitments that we've made are the dollar amounts that are specified, and not, for example, the cost of something as it may be if DPW decides to do that work 5, 10, 20 years down the line.
Yeah, did we run into a problem like that, Jesse, with respect to the Hopkins Street Bridge?
Yeah, and this is exactly the situation that we're hoping to avoid. And just for background for Dave and Greg, the issue there was the $140,000 that the developer had committed to for that project to do the water line upgrade. That was made in 2019. By the time the work is being done 3+ years later, the cost of that was quite different, and the scope of the project, as I understand it, had changed somewhat. So the price of that work ended up being significantly higher. So my understanding is that the developer reached an agreement with Bill Renault on that increased price, but we wanted to short circuit that issue entirely and just make it clear the funds are the funds, and that's where they're being done.
It seems reasonable. Yeah, it just okay. And Greg, you read this too, right? You're good with it as well. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure if there's anything else, but we can keep scrolling and see if anything. For the most part, I think from this point we're in the real general conditions, and then the signature page here.
Right. No, the other one might be in the waivers. I mean, we skipped over the waiver section, but also the separate document of the requested waivers. Was, I think, that the only question, I'm not sure we concluded on it, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, was the one that's conservation related.
The waiver?
Yes.
So
It's probably in here, right? Because
it is, yes. So this one, I've got it up here.
Right.
And Tom, it's on page 13 if you've got a copy in front of you.
Oh,
Yes.
This has to do, the Conservation Commission has a local policy. It's a written policy. It's on their website, which imposes an informal 25-foot buffer zone to wetland resources, as well as a tree replacement policy that's associated with that. So what we've done here, and I don't want to speak for him, but my understanding is that Ezra believes that this is an appropriate waiver request and an appropriate waiver grant. Obviously not intending to waive the State Wetlands Act, but rather specifically this local 25-foot buffer zone policy, which is not a requirement of the Wetlands Act. It's just a local interpretation of the Wetlands Act, just to ensure that it's clear that 25-foot work within the buffer zone it's not being approved by this decision, but the policy of requiring it as a matter of strict enforcement would be waived, and that's what we requested for this.
And then it says any and all subject to approval and they comply with all state. Yeah, that's right. I just didn't remember if we had.
That has to be read in conjunction with, what is it, finding number 24, saying the project is subject to Concom pertaining to the Wetlands Act. So we're not trying to remove any of their state jurisdiction.
Right,
Not
it's just a waiver
not
of
that we
their
could.
policy. It's a waiver of their policy and procedure related to this item, right? It's not their anything statewide or any other requirements, right? But it's just, again, Tom, it's like they haven't applied to them yet, so we're treading on ground where we're mentioning conservation and waiving things and making those findings in our decision when in fact they haven't gone to them yet. So as long as we got, if we're okay with it, Ezra thought it was okay, and we're okay as long as, again, not stepping over the bounds and still giving discretion to the Concom to alter things if they see fit, right?
Okay, waiver granted to authorize under these policies and procedures. What does these refer to?
So that is, probably need to go to the list of requested waivers, which is, it's referenced in the decision, and I'm going to go to it now. All right, so the reference here, Tom, is to this here, and I suppose we can get more specific on what these refer to if we need to. It's their written policies. They are posted on the Conservation Commission's website.
No, I see your point. That's fine.
So, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, Tom. I'm with, it's just, instead of these procedures, you just repeat policies and procedures of the Wakefield Conservation Commission in the actual body rather than referring to the title of the subsection.
Yeah, that'd be a little clearer in reading it anyway. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go back to that previous one.
Removal of existing trees and installation of new trees shown on the project. And all work related to-
So Greg, where were you in?
Just that first sentence,
Uh-huh.
waiver granted to authorize under, instead of these policies, just
Mm-hmm.
basically repeat policies and procedures of the Wakefield Conservation Commission, and not having looked at them. Is that the actual title of their, is it a document that they post on their website?
It is, yeah.
So whatever they title it, and maybe we want to refer to it as such too. Do they have like a revision date or anything?
See if I can find that here. Oh, they do. Yeah, they do. It's called Wakefield Conservation Commission Tree Removal Policy for Landowners Approved 7/6/17, amended 9/9/21.
All right, so you don't have to add that now, but
Yeah.
in the actual decision, we don't need to take time for you to type all that up.
Okay.
And that's the exact policy. I see they have a couple that refers to the 25 feet.
Do they have more than one about that?
They have 3. It doesn't look like these other ones would apply.
Are you on their website too?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, yeah, the tree removal policy, that link, that's
Oh,
what
yeah.
I was
I see it
referring
here
to.
too. Okay.
So the 25 feet comes from the tree removal policy?
Yeah,
It's stated in there. It's
it is. In
yeah,
bold at the beginning. I see it right now.
The commission applies a strict standard of review to the 25-foot buffer zone. Yeah, Wakefield Concom tree removal policy for landowners. Yep, found it as well. Okay, so just restating the name so it's clear what these refers to. Okay,
Yeah, with that clarification, I have no problem with this.
okay. And you'll just spell out the full name of it, Jesse, right, with a date, you know, as of, oh, there you go. Yeah, something like that. Okay,
I was just wondering, we don't have a local wetlands bylaw, but I don't know, Jesse, maybe you know, if we did, would that be something that the waiver of which could be dealt with in a comprehensive permit?
yeah. So I guess the answer to that is it depends on what that would say, what the local bylaw says in terms of whether we would be requesting waivers from any provision of it.
Mhm.
If it's one of the local wetlands bylaws that doesn't have requirements that are stricter than the Wetlands Act, we probably wouldn't be requesting any
Sure.
waivers from that, but we would be requesting approval under that bylaw.
Yeah.
In the nature of the comprehensive permit process, all permits being approved by the zoning board.
Yeah.
So that's not an issue here. I think the reason why this issue came up, and I think it was either Ezra or Dave who flagged it originally, is just because of the ambiguity that the Concom has in this informal policy, but not an actual formal wetlands bylaw.
Mhm. Okay.
okay. And Greg, I know I deferred to you on scrubbing the rest of the requested waivers, and I think we cleaned up a few of them along the way, but was there any lingering question here for this group or Tom?
Yeah, I just have one more. And I don't know if I have a huge view either way, but I know in my initial set of comments, I had mentioned like, I don't know, 190, 11, 190, 14, 190, 15. Go to the applicability and the purpose, the applicability and the purpose and intent of those sections. We're not waiving the general applicability or the purpose and intent, right? I know we put these in other decisions, but as I learn of 40B and stuff, you know, I get a little bit more better eye. So I don't know if those should actually be approved waivers. The general applicability and the general purpose and intent are still there, but you're getting waivers from specific sections. So I don't think those need to be in the decision. Unless
So-
Tom or Jesse has a big, a view either way.
Why don't I'll go to the waiver list so we can see the language here.
And I bring it up again because I think I asked that for 11, 14, 15, and 190/30. And you did remove 190/30, but not 11, 14, or 15.
Right, yeah, right. So where we're concerned here, and the reason why we requested these is the language here, which says the provisions of this chapter shall apply. And so the idea here is that other sections of the bylaw are being waived.
Yep.
This specific language here would seem to be inconsistent with waiver of those other provisions, for example, setbacks or height, things like that, that are being waived as part of this decision. So these requests are really only to, I would say, confirmatory that, you know, there's not some way for the building inspector to come in and say, well, yes, you got an approval of the setbacks that you're proposing here, but you didn't get a waiver of this applicability of the use regulation with respect to a multifamily housing, or you didn't get a waiver of the applicability of the uses here as stated in 14. And I guess this would be more pertaining to the use as opposed to the dimensional requirements. But that's the reason why we requested them. That being said, you know, I have no problem with clarifying or modifying these requests or the actual language approving them to specify what they are and are not approving, and specifically to say that they're not approving a waiver of the purpose of the bylaw, if something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to make work just to make work. I don't think that is needed necessarily. I guess I just don't understand still I understand what you're saying, but in my mind, it doesn't seem to be needed. But on the other hand, the approval and the waivers are limited strictly to the documents anyways.
Yeah, that's true. I think with respect to what they're actually building, I think it's, from our perspective, it's the important point here is the zoning use, which is going to be multifamily, which in this district just isn't allowed.
Yeah, but don't you get that from 190, what is it, 6A2 waiver granted to allow to the development of residential building uses in the SR zoning district?
I would.
Maybe this isn't a big issue. I don't want to beat something that isn't a big issue. Tom, I guess I take your guidance on that.
So how about this? Maybe we could address it with a very short addition. At the end of the first paragraph in section 28, it says, as such, the board grants the requested waivers as set forth below. What if after waivers we said, to the extent necessary to complete the project? So as such, the board grants the requested waivers, comma, to the extent necessary to complete the project, comma, as set forth below. And thus we are I'm not dictating now, but and thus we would be waiving the purposes of the zoning bylaw, but only to the extent needed to create this project.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that works.
And I just checked the Tarrant and Crescent decisions. 11 wasn't in there, but 14 and 15 were, and 30 when we get there, but pretty much the same language.
Okay.
So, but I have no problem adding just the clarifying.
The only thing I didn't get to do, because I was reviewing this on a plane last night, I didn't bring Jesse's updated waiver list, and the Wi-Fi was not working on the plane, of course. So I didn't conform your final requested list to what's on this list. So I can do that, but also take your word for it as of this meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take another look also just to make sure I didn't miss anything, but I'm about 99.9% certain it's conformed. But
Just a couple minor, as long as you've got the red pen out on the waiver list itself.
Mm-hmm.
We can just go that, not here, the actual requested waiver document.
Yep. Let me go to that. Back to that.
Page 4. Is it? Yeah, the last one. It says a total of 58 parking spaces. I think it's 56, and it says 56 in other places.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know why I caught it, but I just saw the 2 different numbers, I think. And I don't know if, again, there's several references to project plans. I see some uppercase, some lowercase, again, with my keen eye for editorial consistency. You know, in the decision, they say approved plans, and we define that, right? But in here, it's a requested set of waivers, whether maybe we just say project plans with capital, you know, initial capitals or something, and just be consistent about it. It'd be an easy cut and paste or find and replace, but just for consistency. Or it's all lowercase because these are just requests. And really what those plans are defined in the final decision, right?
I think that's a good idea to define it. And what I would propose to do is include that in the note that's in the bottom here, on the final page of the waivers, and specify what plans we're referring to, and then define those as project plans in capitals, if that works, if that works for you.
Yeah, again, I don't want to, you know, repeat what's in the decision or override or create any sort of potential conflict. It was just, I just noticed a few different variations on it, I think. So yeah, that's fine. If you want to think about it, put forth something and then send it around in the next couple of days, you know, then bring Ezra in too, and we'll see it with the full board next week. And just make sure everyone's comfortable with it. All right, that was the only other observation. Just kind of a minor thing, but just as long as you had the red pen. Okay, anything else? I think
Not on my end.
This has been good. And I think we covered the main items that I think we intended here. So if anything else comes up, of course, Tom, before we actually close the public hearing, we've extended that, or they've requested an extension and the board's accepted that through February 17th. So we have next week's full board meeting. And assuming things proceed, but if something were to come up and we haven't closed the public hearing, we may come back to you, but I think this is exactly what we needed to get out of this meeting. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Anytime.
Thank you all for your time.
All right. Yep. Thank you guys. Greg, hope you had safe travels, not through Texas.
No, did not go through Texas, thank God.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen, thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
this meeting's adjourned. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.